Good evening and welcome to this evening's mission status briefing for STS-88. With us once again is the STS-88 Lead Flight Director, Bob Castle, and joining him this evening we have Scott Blysath, the STS-88 Lead EVA Officer, and also Greg Harbaugh, the Manager of the EVA Projects Office here at Johnson Space Center. We'll have statements from all three of these gentlemen and we'll be happy to take your questions. Bob?
Okay. We're just up to date on status since the last briefing, since yesterday. The shuttle continues to perform flawlessly. There is literally nothing to talk about. Everything is working very well. We have not added anything to the anomaly log on the shuttle in a couple of days now. Other things that have been going on, you're going to hear a lot about the EVA, of course. Let me talk about a couple other things, though, first. Systems checkout in Unity was proceeding today. It started yesterday, and you heard part of it from Sally yesterday. All three of the intermodule ventilation valves were tested today. The cabin fan has been tested for quite a while. The common berthing mechanisms checkout was completed today. All the IMVs are working fine. The cabin fan has been working fine for several days. The CBMs, or common berthing mechanisms, that checkout was completed. We had some minor hiccups on the port and zenith CBMs, or berthing mechanisms, with one of the 16 bolt controllers on each. That turned out to be a transient after a power cycle and a retry. Both of those were recovered. So we've completed the checkouts. We completed the engagement of the capture latches on the common berthing mechanisms, and all that has been working quite well. So in terms of the systems inside Unity, most of them now have been checked out. There's very little left to do. And this is all in preparation for the ingress day, which is planned for tomorrow. As far as getting ready for ingress, we've also been warming the structure of Unity up so as to get it above the dew point. There are 14 thermal zones in the space station, specifically 9 on the node and 5 on the PMAs that make up the Unity module. 2 of them are about 2 degrees below our limits right now. We'll have no trouble getting them up to temperature. We're in good shape for ingressing the ISS station tomorrow, which is the current plan. Looking ahead then, we'll be doing the ingress tomorrow. The major activity there will be the early comm installation, as well as a variety of other tasks that really haven't changed very much from what's the pre-mission plan. And then of course, after we finish, there'll be 2 days of ingress, and then we'll do EVA 3, and then we'll be coming home and be undocking the next day. I'll give a few words about the EVA. Scott is the one for any of the really detailed stuff. I try not to get in the way of that, and of course Greg knows a lot. Greg will add quite a bit too. Basic EVA task today. We accomplished the major thing we wanted to do, which was the early comm installation, the antennas you just saw on TV. That was the major task of EVA 2. The crew got that done with no problems. We also needed to release a whole bunch of launch restraints on the common berthing mechanisms. All those got picked up, and we needed to put some thermal covers on the trunnion pins. All that went well, with the one exception that we lost one of the thermal covers, and you saw that on TV. That's not expected to be an impact. We will probably figure out a way to put an alternate thermal cover over that, and even if we don't, it's not a big deal. We really need those thermal covers downstream flights when we're trying to keep the structure very warm. Right now, we don't keep it warm for very long, so if we have a heat leak into space, it's not a big deal. I'll let Scott and Greg give the rest of the details on the EVA, and I think that's probably enough for me.
Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, well, I think we had a very successful day today. We carried out all of our primary objectives for the spacewalk, all those that we had in our pre-flight plan. And then in addition to that, we accomplished the deployment of the Nader Zarya Toru antenna. This deployment was accomplished at approximately 5 hours and 40 minutes into the EVA. The EVA lasted a total of 7 hours and 2 minutes. Thought the efforts that went into planning for the Toru antenna deployment was an excellent example of not only the cooperation and teamwork between the ground and the crew in space, but also teamwork between us and our Russian counterparts. Quite a bit of work over the last several days has gone into preparing for the task, and we saw the results of that tonight. One of the primary players or tools that was used in this contingency task was this Russian pole. you've probably heard the crew refer to it as a boat hook. This was a tool that our Russian colleagues recommended that we fly, that's used as just basically as a translation aid and just as a way to extend your reach, which is how we used it tonight. Astronaut Jim Newman was at the end of the RMS position in a foot restraint, and he used this pole with the hook to just give the antenna a nudge. Now this hook, or this pole, extends out to about 2.5 meters. I won't try to extend it here because it's quite large, but it turned out to be quite useful in the task this evening and worked out quite well. But like I said, we had a very successful EVA, and we're looking forward to another one on flight day 10. We'll be looking at the other side of Zarya in assisting the deployment of that Toru antenna, in addition to the tasks that we normally have planned for that EVA. And that's all I have for right now.
Okay, I guess I just have a couple of observations. Scott touched on one of them. First of all, though, this is a point worthy of note, I suppose, in the course of endeavors in space, and that we have put together now 2 successful EVAs out of the over 160 that we anticipate having to deal with over the next 5 years. You've probably heard me comment on that before, but we also call that the EVA wall. Well, we've put 2 bricks in the EVA wall so far, and they're rock solid, and it's a good foundation, and it's the kind of thing that we're going to be able to build from. We have done very well, and our preparation has paid off over and over again. And that leads me to my second comment. It was great insight and careful thought that went into the idea of manifesting this particular tool, when there were a lot of folks out there insisting that there was no potential need or application for such a tool. But the EVA team is always prepared to meet the challenge as they were here. And fortunately, we had the right tool, and we were able to accomplish what we set out to do. But it was a result of good forethought, good planning, and international cooperation. The success we had in deploying that Toru antenna is a direct result of the Phase 1 experience and the cooperation and communication that's developed between the American and Russian EVA teams. We worked as colleagues on this. The process started before Thanksgiving. In fact, some people worked partway or most of the way through the holidays to be prepared should such an event be necessary. You don't see or hear very much about those unsung heroes in the back rooms, but they really brought about the end result that we have today, which is just one more successful notch in the EVA belt. So I'm very proud of this team, the effort that they put out and when nobody's looking late at night, and what that bodes for the future.
Okay, we'll open it up to questions now. Martin?
Martin Berkey with the Huntsville Times. Could you go into a little bit about the background of what went into deciding to deploy this antenna early on in the mission? I think folks talk like maybe they didn't decide whether or not they wanted to do it or not.
Well, I'll address that first, and then Bob and Scott can talk to it. I think we have sort of a tradition of being proactive, look at things somewhat aggressively, but execute conservatively. And those two sort of competing philosophies seem to work pretty well. When the prospect of these antennas not being fully deployed first arose, we had, in fact, gone to Russia prior to the launch and documented the configuration of the FGB. So we had some good data to look at to start with, and we had a pretty good idea what the configuration might be and some good estimates about what the prospects were there. So we looked very positively at what we might be able to do on this mission. And that's where the ops team came in and said, based on the programmatic requirements, can we execute this? And they looked at it very cautiously and skeptically, if you will, as necessary. The combination of the talents of those groups of people resulted in a successful activity that you saw tonight.
If I could you tell me what specifically the communications installation tomorrow is going to consist of, if there's boxes, if they have to pull out, or things they have to activate, and also what's in Unity right now that's working? What kind of equipment, hardware, racks, that kind of stuff?
Okay, well, we'll do them in order, I guess. The equipment for the communications gear tomorrow consists of 3 boxes, 3 electronic boxes. They're white instead of black, but they're 3 large electronics boxes. They're packaged up on aluminum cold plate that the crew will take out of the middeck, install in Unity on the start side in the alcove. They will then hook up a bunch of cabling between those 3 boxes and the the feed-through ports on the hatches, starboard and port hatches where the antennas are. That's the basic installation, and it interconnects those antennas then to the black boxes, to the power supply, and then also into the communication, into the data bus network for the computers on Unity, so it ties it into the nervous system. There's also cables that run back to Zarya and will be used for the crew communication, so when they first arrive, they'll be able to use a terminal, essentially a little laptop PC in Zarya, to communicate with the ground through the early comm system. As far as some of the other systems in the node, it is pretty much outfitted is what it's intended to be, which is a feed-through area. It's intended to be some stowage locations. There are 4 stowage racks, of which one of them is fully installed. One will have the early comm system in it. The other 2 will be set up for soft stowage that will be used filled up on 2A.1. It also has the appropriate ventilation systems, cooling systems, power distribution. All of those things are there, with the exception that the cooling system, the fluid loops, don't have any water in them. They're dry. Those will get water added to them, I believe, at 6A.
Pauline Arriaga, Associated Press. To follow up on that, what are some of the, what are the other duties and tasks they'll be doing tomorrow besides the early communications installation during ingress? Will Sergei be doing the battery work tomorrow? If you could just go through in more detail the other duties they'll have.
Okay, I'll try and give you a thumbnail sketch. I haven't seen the final timeline laid out for tomorrow, so I'm not going to try and, if they're done in different orders, please don't get upset about it. But the early comm is the major thing. The battery change out is going to be the battery current controller will be changed out tomorrow morning, or crew day morning. Nancy Currie and Sergei Krikalev are the 2 IFM trained crewmen, so they're going to go do that. We will also be transferring some stowage, some stuff that's going to be left on board the ISS. We're going to retrieve some things just due to stowage shuffle around. There are a couple of lithium hydroxide canisters for the shuttle that are in the Zarya stowage rack. There's a 3rd safer unit in the stowage rack that we're going to retrieve. There's some other minor things like that. We're also going to be doing a lot of things to get ahead and get ready for future flights. There's a large number of structural closeout panels that are in both Zarya and in Unity. There are different kinds of things. In Unity, there are actual structural panels we call shear panels that you actually remove the panel and return it. In Zarya, there's a whole bunch of bolts that hold locker doors closed. They're there for launch. All those things have to come out before you can really use them on orbit. It takes quite a bit of time to take all of them out. There are several hundred, I think it's over 700 bolts, for example, to be removed. We're going to get ahead and take out a bunch of those things. That's the type of work that's going to be going on tomorrow and the next day, and it'll keep them pretty well busy.
Frank Albertson mentioned yesterday that the first official act is going to be to turn on the light switch. Is it actually going to be dark when they go in there? And I also saw in the package sent up this morning that they might have to actually use flashlights when they first go in. Will they do that? And also, what will the temperature be when they first enter Unity?
Okay, well, let me answer them in reverse. I'm not sure what the temperature is going to be. The dew point is going to be about 45. We need to be 10 degrees above that, and we're going to have some margin. So the temperature is probably going to be on the order of 60 to 70 Fahrenheit, in that range. They will probably use flashlights as they go in, and they will actually physically turn on the lights when they go into Unity. It will be dark when they first go in. There are 3 light switches. They know where they are. All the power is up, and of course air circulation is all up.
Paul,
Paul Hoverston, USA Today. Bob, what sort of materials do you have on board that you could actually fashion a thermal cover out of? And I've got a follow-up.
Okay, well, the engineering folks are currently looking at that. The number one candidate is the MDM thermal cover that we took off on EVA-1 and brought inside the shuttle. It's obviously thermal material, and it's readily available and not needed anymore. So that's the number one candidate. I don't know that that's what they're going to end up with, but that's our first candidate.
Okay, and then just to follow up, I guess, for Greg or for Scott, these issues about things getting loose from Jerry, is it a tether issue? Is it a thermal related issue, and maybe that his hands are getting cold? Could you sort of go into why you think this is happening and what you're going to do about it to keep it from happening, I guess?
Well, I think there are a couple of potential contributing factors. Of course, we're going to look at the hardware, and that process has already been initiated. But I can tell you that these hooks have been acceptance thermal tested to minus 200 degrees. Each individual hook that was used on this flight has gone through that process. So I don't expect that is the cause, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't some mechanical contribution to these hardware losses. We're going to have to go study that, and we're going to have to debrief the crew and understand exactly what they perceive the configurations to be when the individual pieces of hardware were lost. Beyond that, certainly we're going to reinforce the idea of strict tether protocol in the future and make sure that is emphasized in the training process so that it doesn't reoccur. If it was a crew error, that we preclude that in the future. I can tell you, absolutely guarantee you, that nobody feels worse about any of those items being lost than the crew members. And I guarantee you also that they are going to be very diligent in the future on EVA-3. And certainly all future crews will be have their consciousness sort of re-raised as a result of these couple of losses. So, but in the greater scheme of things, these are small failings. We're going to have bumps in the road as we go along, and we're learning as we go. We know an awful lot about EVA, but that doesn't mean we know everything.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today, for anybody who cares to handle this one. There have been a lot of people who've been wondering for a long time whether you guys and your Russian counterparts would ever get to the point where you were going to swing open hatches between these two craft, and I'm wondering if one of you can comment on the significance of the hatch opening tomorrow.
I'll stab first. I think it's a very significant event. I think it's the first entrance of a combined Russian-American crew into an international space station. You're going to see all nationalities flying to it. You'll see all nationalities participating in it. It's a very large program. I think this is the very first step in that. I think it's very appropriate with an international crew going to a first visit to the International Space Station. And even though this is a very small beginning, it's a small part of what the station is going to look like, I think this is a very significant and almost momentous event.
And could you give us an idea of what we're going to see tomorrow in terms of TV downlink from inside the space station? How much and when, and what we'll see?
Well, I'm not going to try and give precise wins and numbers of minutes. We do have a remote camera that the crew is going to be able to take into Unity, and I think it'll extend pretty much all the way into the Zarya module. I think you'll see bits and pieces of the IFM that's going to be done on the current converter unit. I think you'll probably see a tour of the space station as it exists today, conducted by the crew. I don't know that all that's scheduled yet, but I'd be surprised if they don't give at least a part of that. We'll probably see some closeout of the equipment that they're installing, the early comm system and all of that. As to how much, I don't know. I haven't looked at the details of the timeline. We'll get what we get. The attitude is driven by power. It generally is pretty good. It's what we call XPOP, and it's pretty good for communications, so I expect we'll get a fair amount.
Mark.
I'm Mark Ruff from the Houston Chronicle. I had just a question about the common berthing mechanisms. At this point, even in a general sense, what happens to them next before they're really ready to receive another component?
Probably very little will happen to them next. We're going to continue to study why we had the transient events that we had and try to understand them. Since we recovered them, obviously the system is still working, but there's no real further checkout planned other than trying to understand these problems until they receive the next components, which will be on Flight 3A. We'll berth the Z1 truss to the Zenith and berth PMA-3 to the nadir port.
I guess I just wanted to make sure, is there any more hardware that has to be put on them, or are they basically ready to, they have patches and all that? Is that, okay.
Okay, yeah, I see your question. No, they are complete. They are complete functional common berthing mechanisms as of right now. They're ready to receive the hardware. If we had PMA-3 on this flight, we could install it.
Kathy.
Kathy Sawyer with the Washington Post. For Greg, I guess I'd like to know a few more details about the mysterious tether breaches, just to fill in the picture. Since Jerry Ross tonight seemed absolutely convinced and said on the loop that he had tethered this blanket, was there any commonality among all of the 3 items so far that have come loose? Or were they all on the same tether? Were they all in the same vicinity of his person? Were they all attached to the same ring? Was there anything that contributes to an analysis of what's going on?
Well, that's a good question. It's one I've been asking. The only commonality I've found so far is that 2 of the 3 had equipment hooks at the end of them. The equipment hook is a relatively new design, but it's a proven design. One of the things we have to go look at is there any mechanical way that you can actuate this inadvertently? Now, I think that we've done that already, and that analysis is on the shelf, and the testing has been done. But, of course, we're going to go back and re-examine that. The other item that was lost, that being the slide wire tray, was a bayonet fitting that slid into a fixture on the tool stanchion with a slide lock over it. So there was a completely different mechanism, and so there's no commonality there at all.
And just to follow up on the temperature question in Unity again, and without the missing 1 blanket out of 4, as I understand it, on these trunnions, what will be the temperature difference if the blanket can't be reattached?
I don't know that there is any temperature difference inside. I think the concern and the reason you put the blankets on the trunnions is that it provides a cold point soak through from the outside to the inside, and so you might get some condensation in that area. But I don't think it's going to substantially alter the temperature, but I'll defer to Bob if he's got a better answer on that.
No, what it's going to wind up being is the heaters in the vicinity of that trunnion are going to run a little longer tonight than they would have otherwise. But we'll get them above temperature. It will not be a problem.
What is the temperature you hope to keep Unity at when there's nobody on board after the shuttle leaves?
The basic structure of the node is going to be allowed to drop into well below freezing. Our limit is minus 35 Fahrenheit of the node itself. So the structure will be allowed to get quite cold when no one's there. And again, so the fact that we have a heat leak when we're trying to maintain minus 35 is not a very big deal. And all it means tonight is that the heaters in that zone 7 and 8, are going to run a little longer than they would have otherwise. But we got plenty of margin.
Hey, Paul with a follow-up.
Yeah, on the Toru antenna question, Jim Newman seems to have this down pretty well now. I wondered why you didn't want him to go ahead and do the other one, if that was a time limitation thing, or did you need to reconfigure the arm? I mean, why not just have him knock that one out too?
I made that decision because it was time. We were 20 minutes to sunset and 20 minutes to the limit of the EVA. By the time we got the RMS all the way around to the other side of Unity, it would have been close to sunset. Then we'd want to wait until the sun came up again so we'd have good lighting of what we were doing. We'd have well exceeded the EVA time by the time we got there. It's purely time.
Martin?
Martin Berkey with Huntsville Times. Did I hear you say that there was a safer and some other equipment stored on Zarya? And if so, why is it there? What was the purpose?
they're stored in Unity. There was a safer stored in Unity, and just a matter of we had a stowage rack there. We wanted to take advantage of it. So there's a safer stored there. There's also some lithium hydroxide canisters. There's another set of, I believe, the suit. We have the CCC canisters for the suit stored there. There's a variety of little things that I can't remember all of them. Things that we did not need until late in the mission, and things that if we couldn't ingress into the station for whatever reason we would never need, we simply put those there, which allowed us to put other things in the shuttle middeck. We were very, very stowage limited. We tried to take advantage of every little nook and cranny, and Bill Bastido in the station program was the master of how to move those things around as one of his many duties. So we managed to pull that together. That's really the only reason they're there. There's nothing in there that couldn't have been happily carried in the shuttle middeck if there was plenty of room to do it.
Todd?
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for Bob Castle. Can you give us a sort of a laundry list of the type of things they'll be dropping off in the Unity and Zarya modules tomorrow for the first resident crew?
Okay. I'm probably going to do pretty poor at this because I didn't prepare for the list, and that was not high on my list of things to work pre-mission. We're dropping off a very large we're dropping off some tools. There's already quite a large selection of tools in Unity. We're going to be leaving some tools outside that we placed out there on EVA number 3. Again, stuff that's used on EVAs, we'll leave it there. I'm really not sure what the rest of all of the stuff is. There's a fairly small amount of material. We're going to leave we're going to leave a computer behind that's there for the teleconferencing system. The early comm system, of course, we've talked about. That's the basic things that we're going to be transferring and leaving. We're going to be getting a few things back that I said were stowed there. And I can get you a more detailed list, but it's a fairly small list for this flight. The later on logistics flights, 2A1 and 2A2, will be leaving thousands of pounds.
Are you aware of any items for creature comfort? I think there's some clothing being left, and I was wondering if there's any other things like that, books, movies, anything like that.
I didn't say clothing because I wasn't sure. I believe we're leaving some clothing behind. As far as books and movies, I don't think so. We're not leaving any water on board, for example, because it's going to get cold, it will freeze, and it would also be so long we're past our certified date for stowage of water in the containers we'd be using. We're not leaving a lot of that type of thing because it's such a long time between this flight and the first crew coming on board. That's being picked up mainly by the other flights, and the fact that this flight was so subscribed already with we didn't have enough stowage to carry things up. Just putting the material in we needed to do all the work we're doing on these 3 EVAs and the installation took up almost all the middeck space. So there's not a lot of that type of material going up. I believe there are some clothes, and we can get a full list of that. There's a list out there.
Mark Huroff, Houston Chronicle. Just a couple of follow-up questions on the boat hook. One, does it get left behind? And two, did the Russians come to you and say, please take this, or did NASA say, let's take it? I'm still not clear exactly why this was who instigated such a good decision?
It was a result of joint discussions over a period of really weeks or even months that was our EVA team and their EVA team talking about what the potential scenarios are that we might need to deal with. As I said before, there were some folks who insisted that nothing bad could happen with regard to solar arrays or antennas on the FGB, and yet the EVA sort of motto is to be prepared for any contingency, and so collectively it was a joint decision to insist that it be carried on board, and it will be left behind, and we're evaluating the options for where to leave it. But it has potential future applications, and there's no point in bringing something back if you can leave it up there. Most likely it'll be left outside, I think, on the node somewhere, but we're still collectively evaluating that.
Just one more follow on that. What are some of the things that a tool like this could be used for besides what you did today? I mean, if it was somebody's good idea to bring it, there must have been like a range of different potential uses that you talked about.
Well, the other application other than antennas is solar arrays. The Russians in the Phase 1 program had occasion more than once to manually orient a solar array, and this tool would be useful for that sort of thing.
Okay, any other follow-ups? Paul?
Just very quickly, Bob, has the patch been reattached to the side of Unity? It looks to be a little firmer now than it was the other day.
Yeah, I believe Jerry picked that up at the end of EVA 1.
It wasn't anything that required a long procedural list that, I mean, just pushed it, basically.
It's Velcroed on. It's basically push it back on. People did cook up a multi-step, push it here, push it there, but it's basically push it back on. The Velcro will reattach, and you're done, which is all I believe he did, and it worked just fine.
Martin?
For Mr. Castle, what's the status on the floodlights that went out the other day, and does that hurt any kind of documentation that you'd want to do inside the bay?
No, the last status, I think we've got 3 of them. I can't remember exactly which 3 have failed. There's several more out in the payload bay. We've had a history of problem with these lights. When I said the shuttle was flying flawlessly, I probably should have mentioned those, but we have unfortunately had a history of problems with them. Several have failed. There's improvement program in the works that I'm not real up on, but I know there's an improvement in the works. But no, there's no real concern about it. There's no real need for them anymore, and so we're not really worried about it.
Okay, we have no questions at the other NASA centers, so with that we'll conclude this briefing. Thank you very much.